Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting over Episode 6 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. If you'd like to watch along, start watching now. Alright, so last we left off, a new angel, I believe it's the fifth angel, showed up, and almost immediately it blasted Unit 1 with like some sort of particle beam, so already things are not going very well for Nerve and humanity as a whole. So Shinji has survived, but, things are definitely in a tenuous situation. Even if he does live through this and make it out fairly healthy, Unit 1 is definitely severely damaged. So it seems like they're really having to bring out all the stops in terms of emergency protocols here. So now that the angel is no longer obstructed by Unit 1, it appears to have extruded a drill of sorts and is preparing to start drilling. So interestingly enough, Nerve is sort of, playing for time here. They're sort of distracting it with, a balloon in the shape of Unit 1 and trying to counterattack it. But it seems like no matter what they're doing, everything is so far ineffective. So, for reasons that are currently unknown, the Angel is boring into the Earth. Apparently, it's attempting to attack Nerve HQ directly. So, according to what Ritsuko is saying, Unit 1 took some pretty heavy damage to its armor, but the underlying control systems weren't damaged, although only by the skin of its teeth. So everything's sort of on a tight timeline here. There's about 10 hours until the 5th Angel pierces the Geofront, and before that happens, they're going to have to get Unit 1 and Shinji back in fighting condition. So Misato is sort of trying to take an alternate solution to this angel problem by use of, I guess, a super weapon of sorts that's not the Evangelion. So they've already crunched the numbers with the supercomputers, and they sort of agree that it could work, albeit it's somewhat unlikely. So Nerve is really throwing their weight around here. Misato is requisitioning this positron cannon from the Japan Self-Defense Force. And she's doing so on pretty short notice, especially considering that it's a sort of a prototype weapon. So Misato is really, really throwing her weight around here. This positron rifle takes, what was it, 180 million kilowatts in order to power it for one shot. Misato seems pretty dead set on essentially taking Japan's power grid off entirely and funneling all of that generation into the positron rifle. Now, power is something of my specialty, professionally speaking. And just looking at this, that's a serious thing they're trying to do. Essentially funneling generation from all over a country, transmitting it into a single area, and then sort of funneling that power all at once. So while Misato's securing the positron cannon, Ritsuko has sort of developed a shield, like a riot shield for use by the Evangelions. So it's not perfect, but it can hold off the particle beam from the angel for about 17 seconds before melting through. So that's not great, but it gives them a fighting chance, which was a fair bit more than they had when Unit 1 got blasted. So Shinji is finally woken up, and he seems pretty healthy, all things considered. So Shinji's sort of doing that thing where he wakes up in the hospital again, and rather than anybody with authority visiting, Rei has sort of come to give him the briefing on what the mission is. Like the previous episode, she's pretty nonchalant and emotionless about everything. Notably, Shinji feels some trepidation about piloting Unit 1 again, but Rei is pretty dismissive of it. She also reveals that she's prepared to pilot Unit 1 instead if need be. Which I guess is probably as close as Rei gets to compassion at this point. That said, she doesn't really stick around for very much longer after saying that. So meanwhile, Kensuke Toji and some other classmates are acting delinquently again to get a glimpse of the Evangelions. And this time, there's two of them. So I guess they're really getting their money's worth. Meanwhile, the fifth angel is still boring away. There's only about 4 hours left before it breaches the geofront. Now they're setting up the positron cannon, and Shinji is asking some really good questions about, are you really sure it's a good idea to be using this thing? So based on my somewhat layman's understanding of physics, a positron is an antimatter particle. So, I don't exactly blame Shinji for having some trepidation about using a weapon like that. So, Ritsuko mentions this little thing about, you don't have to do the aiming yourself, just trust the computers. And that really sort of puts me in mind of Star Wars, when Luke Skywalker blew up the Death Star by using the Force rather than by trusting the aiming computer. It's been a while since I've watched Evangelion, but I wonder if that sort of plays out here too, and if that was like a deliberate reference. Rei, in her own bizarre, emotionless way, is, I guess, providing Shinji some comfort by saying that she'll be the one to protect him. I guess in a practical sense that's true, since she'll be the one holding the riot shield. So there's some interesting conversation going on here between Rei and Shinji. And I guess based on like the weird cryptic things Rei says, you could take that as some foreshadowing for some of what I know will happen later. But I guess looking at it with the context of what we currently know, I think we're supposed to come to the conclusion that Rei is just a weird, weird person. So things are starting up in earnest now, and they're funneling all the electrical energy from all over Japan into the positron cannon. And there's all kinds of, high-rated circuit breakers and cooling systems. Without, analyzing the system, I can't really comment on it too much, but I think it's an interesting idea, if nothing else. And to be fair, I don't know how much thought they actually put into this, but I think it would be a cool little thing to analyze to see if it was practical. So I guess now the problems of funneling an entire energy's nation into one point is becoming apparent because bits of the cable are starting to overheat. There's a little shot of these cables starting to smolder. And, that's a real concern. Because if you have cables that are too small for the current flowing through them, they pose a very definite fire risk. And, electrical fires tend to be very bad indeed. So it's something you got to be careful of. Not that it necessarily applies to everyday life. So, the positron cannon's first shot was sort of deflected by the Angel's own counterattack. And they both sort of missed targets. Unfortunately, the Angel has now penetrated the geofront in earnest. Even worse, the Angel is able to recharge its own particle weapon faster than the positron rifle can charge. So Shinji is now in the unfortunate position of having to be defended by Rei with the riot shield while waiting for the positron rifle to recharge and target before he can fire again. So fortunately, Shinji does indeed manage to shoot the angel and kill it. Unfortunately, Rei probably got a little more banged up by the particle beam than was probably healthy. And interestingly, Shinji sort of mirrors what his father does, first by pulling the entry plug out with his Evangelion, despite it, burning the Eva's hand, and second by opening the entry plug himself, even though he doesn't do it barehanded. It's this sort of this little parallelism between Gendo and Shinji. So, fortunately for all parties involved, Rei is fine. But Shinji is clearly emotionally distraught by the whole thing. And Rei doesn't know how to feel about it, going as far as to express that, this is out of her depth. I guess she sort of displays a little humanity here by smiling, but she really only does so when prompted. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one.